And let's talk a little bit about chronic stress. You've brought it up a couple times now. I think it's an important consideration when we're actually talking about estrogen dominance. And you are really a subject matter expert here. And I think that most of us, we like to discount the physiological consequences of stress. Like what we think stress is like this red-faced, screaming, pulling their hair. That's like the stressed out person. When for women, of course, we have a very unique and separate stress response, number one. But number two, if my life is falling apart and you come to me and you say, "Hey, Steph, how are you?" What is 99% of the time I'm going to say, "I'm fine. I'm great. How are you?" Even though in the background, things are just, it's all chaotic. Right.
How many of us is that the case, right? It's chaos back there.
And we're all like,
I put makeup on, but what is it really looking like back there?
Right.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that because one of my favorite things to say is you cannot green smoothie your way out of chronic stress.
Yeah.
And you can't kale salad your way. And now I know I just touted all the benefits of green smoothies and kale salads. I recognize. And will they help you? 100%. But and will supplementation support you? Can you give back to your mitochondria because your mitochondria is actually the one that's making cortisol? Yes, you can absolutely take the alpha lipoic acid. You could take the acetyl L-carnitine. You can take the CoQ10. I can keep naming all the things that your mitochondria needs to function. But at the end of the day, if you're constantly in a state of triggering up the stress response system, you're going to constantly continue to keep depleting. Yeah. And we know that one of the biggest hormones involved, cortisol, is going to have a profound impact on so many other hormone systems inside of the body, including estrogen dominance. Absolutely. I think one of the things that a lot of us don't know is that we think about cortisol, we think about the survival hormone, which yes, it is. But then one of the number one jobs of cortisol is to regulate insulin. And when we have a situation where cortisol isn't working proper, like when it's overly, we're just firing it off over and over and over again, you are then firing off insulin over and over. So we're constantly crying wolf. And what we know, not to say that I'm not concerned about liver function and what happens with the liver and the gut when it comes to inflammation. But I always say that the number one hormone that women need to focus on when it comes to our 40s and beyond is insulin. Because insulin, we think about hemoglobin A1C as an inflammatory marker because of insulin resistance. And that is also showing us that insulin resistance leads to dementia or cardiovascular disease or cancer or, a number of different chronic conditions. And what a lot of us don't know is one of the biggest triggers for insulin resistance is going to be deregulated cortisol levels due to how we're managing stress in our stress response system on the daily. And what we don't recognize, I think, Stephanie, what you said is that anytime we find ourselves kind of like that, like we just get a text message or we're running late to a meeting or something's happening with our family or whatever that may be, the average woman can fire off the stress response system 25 to 50 times a day and just not even know it. And we talked about this. I in my 20s, I was addicted to stress. I leveraged it. I used to call stress my slide edge because that's when I felt that jolt of that little extra something that I could use to get through the rest of my day. And I just kept leveraging and buying against it until I had severe chronic fatigue. And so oftentimes, a lot of us, we're mistaking what we think is that extra something, that little extra energy, that extra jolt that we just got. That's adrenaline, right? And in order for us to have harnessed that adrenaline, we had to fire off the stress response system, the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And once we get into a habit of pushing that button, we trigger it more and more and more. And initially we can get away with it. We could potentially get away with it for a decade, maybe even 2 decades. And we can kind of brush off symptoms as, just every day. That's how women are. That's just the way things are for us. But eventually it's going to start to show up. It's going to start to show up in prediabetes. It may show up in an autoimmune condition, or often I see it usually shows up in chronic fatigue and burnout.